The air shimmered with anticipation as the grand hall filled with the kind of glamour that only a high-profile fashion show could summon. Gleaming chandeliers threw golden light across the runway, reflecting off polished marble floors that stretched endlessly under the feet of the arriving guests. Flashbulbs erupted like fireworks as photographers lined the entrance, their lenses capturing every glittering gown and meticulously tailored suit. The hum of voices rose and fell like a tide, the mingling of celebrities, investors, designers, and influencers creating a charged atmosphere that promised spectacle. The music pulsed faintly in the background, the steady rhythm syncing with the heartbeat of the event itself. Grand, intoxicating, unforgettable. The doors opened wider, and murmurs spread before the announcement was even made. Daniel Mercer, the young and wildly successful millionaire whose name was as synonymous with luxury as the brand's showcase tonight, had arrived. He stepped out of his black limousine with the polished ease of someone born to the spotlight, though those who knew him best remembered he had clawed his way into this life. On his arm, clinging with a practiced smile, was Sabrina, a woman whose beauty was impossible to ignore. She wore a daring crimson gown, slit high enough to silence even the most talkative guest, her jewelry catching every flicker of light. Together, they posed, Sabrina tilting her chin with confidence, Daniel flashing the self-assured smirk that so often graced magazine covers. Cameras fired relentlessly, but behind the polite applause and forced greetings lay a quieter storm. Whispers spread through the rows of seated guests as soon as they took their front row seats. Some concealed their shock poorly, others pretended indifference, but all noted the same thing: Daniel's heavily pregnant wife, Elena, was nowhere to be seen. It was scandalous enough that he paraded his mistress at an event of this caliber, but her absence only sharpened the sting. How brazen, one socialite muttered under her breath, though she couldn't tear her eyes away from the scene. Yet as models glided gracefully down the runway, a truth simmered beneath the surface, waiting for its perfect moment to explode. The audience saw only Sabrina's gleam and Daniel's arrogance, but none realized the quiet power orchestrating the entire evening. For while Elena Mercer might not have been seated in the crowd, she was there, in every design that graced the runway, in every detail woven into the show's very fabric. She was not absent at all. She was the unseen heartbeat of the night, waiting for her reveal. Long before the lights of the fashion show dazzled the city and before Daniel Mercer began flaunting his wealth with such arrogance, there had been Elena. She was not the kind of woman who chased after recognition or glittering attention. Her strength had always been quiet, the kind that was felt in steady choices and unwavering loyalty rather than shouted from rooftops. Years earlier, when she was still a student with dreams bigger than her resources, she had met Lila, a spirited young designer whose creativity was boundless but whose circumstances limited her reach. Their friendship bloomed quickly, rooted in mutual respect and ambition. Over countless late nights, they sketched designs on scraps of paper, sharing visions of a brand that would celebrate elegance, authenticity, and strength. While Lila possessed the artistic brilliance, Elena had a natural instinct for strategy and business. She had a keen eye for partnerships, funding, and the kind of negotiations that could turn dreams into sustainable enterprises. When the idea of launching their own fashion label seemed impossible, it was Elena who secured the initial investors, negotiated contracts, and persuaded skeptical financiers that their brand was not only viable but destined for greatness. Together, they built the foundation brick by brick, Lila sewing prototypes late into the night while Elena crafted proposals and balance sheets at the kitchen table. It was their combined effort, not Daniel's fortune, that birthed the label now dazzling the runway. But Elena had never been one to crave the spotlight. Where others might have sought interviews and magazine features, she preferred to let the designs speak for themselves. Even now, pregnant with the child she had once believed would bind her marriage more closely, she chose silence over spectacle. She avoided the flashing cameras not because she was weak or afraid, but because her priorities were different. She nurtured her unborn baby with the same care she had poured into the company, channeling her energy into building legacies rather than parading for applause. This decision was deeply symbolic of who she was. Daniel, with his obsession for public admiration, represented everything superficial: shiny cars, luxury parties, and the constant need for validation. Elena, on the other hand, valued substance. She found pride in stability, in creating something that would last long after the headlines faded. Where Daniel flaunted a mistress in a crimson gown, Elena had been quietly weaving her empire behind the curtain. She didn't need the world's approval because the truth was that the empire was already hers. The irony was sharp. While Daniel thought himself the center of the evening, basking in whispers of his scandalous entrance, the true architect of the night was watching from behind the scenes. Elena's handprints were everywhere, stitched into the gowns, polished into the brand identity, woven into every detail that enchanted the audience. She was not absent. She was present in the purest, most undeniable way, as a builder, a visionary, and a co-founder who didn't need to flaunt her power because she was the power. The moment Daniel Mercer stepped fully into the grand hall, the air seemed to shift. Cameras swiveled, microphones were subtly adjusted, and the low murmur of the crowd escalated into a collective buzz of curiosity and judgment. On his arm, Sabrina glided with the poise of someone accustomed to attention, her smile bright, teeth gleaming under the harsh glare of the flashbulbs. Every step they took drew eyes, every tilt of Sabrina's chin seemed calculated to maximize her visibility, and every smirk from Daniel radiated the unshakable arrogance of a man who believed the world existed to applaud him. Investors whispered behind their hands, celebrities nudged one another with raised eyebrows, and journalists jotted furiously into their notebooks. Daniel's entrance wasn't just noticed, it dominated the room. Sabrina, acutely aware of the spectacle she was creating, thrived in it. She relished the knowing glances, the subtle gossip that rippled across the audience, and the small, envious frowns she caught on the faces of women seated in the front rows. Her laughter, soft yet deliberate, carried through the hall, blending with the music and chatter to create a veneer of light-hearted charm. She leaned into Daniel as if claiming him as her prize, unaware, or uncaring, of the moral weight pressing down on their public display. In that moment, she embodied the audacity of someone who knew she was both desired and envied, a dangerous combination in a room full of people who measured influence and respect with precision. But not everyone was captivated by the scene. Elena's allies, partners, designers, and close friends who had helped build the brand from the ground up, watched with silent fury. Each confident step Daniel took and each smirk he offered was a dagger to them, a blatant demonstration of disrespect toward the woman who had founded the empire they all believed in. They knew Elena's true power, the quiet authority that had orchestrated the very event they were witnessing, and seeing Daniel parade his mistress in front of her colleagues and potential investors was intolerable. Their eyes followed him with a mixture of disbelief and suppressed anger, calculating silently how the night might turn in Elena's favor. The entire scene was a study in arrogance and betrayal. Daniel's confidence was a mask, one that concealed both ignorance and entitlement. His disregard for the consequences of flaunting his mistress in such a public arena reflected a deep-seated belief that social status and wealth allowed him to act without accountability. Sabrina's eager participation compounded the humiliation, turning what could have been a private indiscretion into a public spectacle. The audience, unaware of the full story, witnessed only the surface, a man with a mistress, while beneath the glitz simmered the quiet storm of Elena's silent power, preparing to reclaim the narrative. Years earlier, Elena had walked into Daniel Mercer's life with hope, trust, and a heart ready to give more than it would ever receive in return. At first, their love had seemed like a story written by fate itself. Daniel was ambitious but struggling, a man with raw potential and a hunger for success that matched Elena's own quiet determination. She had been captivated by his vision, his intensity, the way he spoke about dreams with fire in his eyes. Elena, in turn, offered him stability, unwavering support, and the kind of patience that softened even his most restless moods. She had been there when he stumbled, when investors turned him away, when the nights were long and the office lights burned late into the night. Every victory, every step toward his fortune, had been a shared journey, a testament to her loyalty and belief in him when few others dared. Their love, however, began to fray as Daniel's priorities shifted. The thrill of wealth, power, and public admiration grew irresistible to him, and he gradually abandoned the quiet devotion Elena had offered in favor of flashy parties and a constant pursuit of approval. Elena noticed the small cracks first, the delayed texts, the lingering glances at other women, the subtle dismissals that spoke louder than words. Each time she confronted him, she was met with charm, empty promises, or a smug sense of entitlement that only deepened the wound. She endured, believing in the man she loved, hoping the bond they had built would withstand the pressures of success. Then came the turning point. Daniel's infidelity, blatant and unrepentant, revealed itself not in whispers but in public displays designed to provoke and impress. While Elena's world had been carefully constructed around family, growth, and meaningful accomplishment, Daniel's actions were a spectacle of betrayal. He flaunted a mistress, disregarding the promises he had once made, exposing the raw nerve of Elena's devotion. The contrast was sharp and painful. Daniel, who once depended on her unwavering support, now relied on appearances, status, and shallow attention to maintain his ego. Elena's heartbreak was profound, but it also ignited a quiet, simmering strength. She realized that the foundation she had laid, both in her personal life and in the empire she was helping to build, could no longer be overshadowed by Daniel's arrogance. Each late-night designing collections, each strategic decision behind the scenes, each careful negotiation with investors became an act of reclamation. Her vision was not only to succeed but to flourish without him, to create a legacy that reflected her intellect, creativity, and integrity rather than Daniel's fleeting desire for admiration. In the midst of the gala, as Daniel basked in whispers and shallow admiration, Elena's mind replayed these moments. Love given freely, trust betrayed, and the slow awakening of power that belonged solely to her. She drew strength from the knowledge that while Daniel flaunted appearances, she had been quietly crafting reality. Every thread, every fabric, every calculated decision was hers. The irony of the evening was sweet. While the world saw her absent, she had always been present, preparing to step forward not as a betrayed wife, but as the woman who had quietly built an empire in the shadow of a man too blind to see her worth. Backstage, the atmosphere was a study in controlled chaos, a world of hurried assistants, meticulous designers, and models poised like dancers ready to spring into motion. Yet amidst the frenzy, Elena stood apart, serene and composed, her presence commanding attention without a single word. Her maternity gown, flowing yet elegant, hinted at the life growing within her, a quiet testament to resilience and purpose. She adjusted a final cuff on a model's outfit, offered a brief, reassuring smile to a nervous assistant, and then turned to the mirror to compose herself. Her reflection was a blend of determination and grace. There was no trace of the pain or betrayal she had endured, only the calm of someone who knew her power and waited for the right moment to reveal it. Lila approached, her eyes sparkling with encouragement and pride. "You're going to own that stage," she whispered, handing Elena a thin folder containing last-minute notes and final adjustments. "Everything you've built, every decision, every sacrifice, it's all here. And tonight, everyone will see it." Elena nodded, taking a deep breath, feeling the steady thrum of anticipation building inside her. Unlike Daniel, who thrived on superficial attention, Elena had mastered the art of silent influence. She didn't need the spotlight to affirm her worth, she simply needed it to deliver the truth. Around them, the models lined up, their gowns glistening under the harsh lights of backstage bulbs. Assistants hurried past, clips and pins in hand, but Elena moved calmly among them, offering small corrections, gentle reminders, and quiet encouragement. Each gesture was deliberate, controlled, a testament to the authority she had cultivated not through dominance but through mastery of her craft. She embodied the very essence of leadership, guidance without arrogance, presence without pretense. The distant murmur of the audience seeped backstage, the faint echo of applause and camera flashes reminding her of the spectacle that awaited. Every detail of the show, the lighting cues, the timing of the models' entrances, the arrangement of the runway, had passed through her hands. She had built the evening from concept to execution, ensuring that every stitch, every seam, every movement told the story of elegance, strength, and resilience. Daniel may have thought he was the star, Sabrina the dazzling spectacle, but Elena's influence was woven into the very fabric of the event. As the music began its final countdown, Elena took one last deep breath, straightened her posture, and stepped forward, a quiet storm ready to claim her stage. There was no fear in her eyes, only focus, dignity, and the knowledge that tonight the truth would outshine arrogance. While the world had been distracted by Daniel's display, it was Elena who had orchestrated the moment they would never forget. Every whisper of awe, every flashbulb, every hushed conversation would bear her mark, a testament to the quiet, unwavering power of a woman who had built an empire in the shadows. The moment Elena stepped onto the runway, the room seemed to pause, as if the universe itself had conspired to shift the spotlight in her direction. Cameras pivoted, flashes erupted, and a hush fell over the audience that had just been buzzing with gossip and speculation. She moved with the poise of someone who understood not only her worth but the power of presence. Every step was deliberate, her gown flowing like liquid elegance, catching the lights and reflecting them with a subtle brilliance that drew eyes and held them captive. Whispers ran through the crowd. Who was this radiant woman, glowing with confidence, commanding attention without a single word? The models followed behind her, carrying the designs she had meticulously co-created with Lila, each garment a story of artistry, dedication, and vision. It was Elena's genius that tied the collection together, her fingerprints evident in every line, every fold, every shimmer of fabric. While Daniel and Sabrina had entered the hall seeking admiration for appearances, Elena's entry demanded respect for substance. She was the architect of the spectacle, the unseen force that had orchestrated every detail of the evening, and now she was stepping into the audience's full view, ready to claim the recognition that had been rightfully hers all along. Daniel, seated in the front row with Sabrina by his side, froze as the realization hit. The whispers that had been circulating about his bold entrance with his mistress were drowned out by the stunned silence that followed Elena's reveal. His smirk faltered, replaced by a tense awareness that he was no longer the center of attention. Sabrina's confident facade wavered as the crowd's focus shifted, her attempts to maintain charm falling flat against Elena's undeniable presence. The irony was exquisite. The man who had flaunted his mistress to impress others was now overshadowed by the very woman he had betrayed. The applause began tentatively, a ripple at first, and then built into a wave that washed over the room. Journalists scrambled to rewrite their notes, photographers angled for the perfect shot, and industry leaders leaned forward, captivated. Elena smiled, graceful and controlled, acknowledging the audience with a quiet dignity that spoke louder than any words. There was no bitterness, no public condemnation, only the serene power of a woman reclaiming her narrative. Each step down the runway was a declaration. She was not a victim, she was a creator, a co-founder, a force to be reckoned with. As she reached the center of the runway, Elena paused, allowing the energy of the room to envelop her. Every eye was fixed on her. Every whispered comment carried the weight of astonishment and admiration. This was her moment, not the moment Daniel had tried to manufacture with his arrogance, nor Sabrina with her fleeting glamour. It was a triumph born of quiet labor, of vision, of resilience. Tonight, Elena Mercer would not just be seen, she would be remembered. She had stepped out of the shadows and into the brilliance she had always deserved, leaving a stunned audience and two very humbled observers in her wake. Daniel's confidence, so carefully curated, began to crumble the moment Elena's presence dominated the room. He shifted uneasily in his seat, adjusting his tie as if the physical act could restore the control slipping through his fingers. Sabrina leaned closer, whispering reassurances that sounded hollow even to her own ears, but the unease in Daniel's eyes was undeniable. He had walked in expecting admiration, applause for his boldness, and perhaps envy at his audacious display with Sabrina. Instead, the audience had collectively turned their attention to Elena, the woman he had underestimated, the wife he had betrayed, and the co-founder he had ignored. Reporters, quick to sense a story, circled with pens poised and cameras raised. "Mrs. Mercer," one called, voice carrying above the ambient music, "are you the true co-founder of tonight's show?" Elena's smile, calm and poised, cut through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. She inclined her head gracefully and confirmed, "Yes, I am. Every design, every detail, every moment of this show has been crafted under my guidance." The crowd erupted into applause, some standing, others clapping and snapping photos, all captivated by the revelation that the power behind the spectacle was not the man flaunting a mistress but the woman who had remained quietly devoted to her vision. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed, words failing him as he attempted to reclaim authority. "Well, it's not just her," he stammered, trying to minimize the moment, but the effort was futile. Investors leaned forward, their expressions sharpened with interest, and celebrities whispered in recognition of Elena's talent and influence. Every attempt to regain control only highlighted his arrogance and disrespect, exposing him as a man who valued appearances over substance and had miscalculated spectacularly. Sabrina, sensing the shift in power, became frantic. Her laughter, once effortless, now trembled as she realized that her role as the center of attention was fleeting, a fragile construct built on Daniel's ego rather than her own merit. The audience's awe, once directed at the pair, now fully embraced Elena, and the stark contrast left the couple visibly unsteady. Elena's allies, positioned strategically in the crowd, exchanged satisfied glances, their silent support a reminder that Daniel had underestimated the woman he had tried to diminish. This public confrontation was not explosive in a traditional sense. There were no shouting matches or dramatic accusations. Instead, it was the quiet, undeniable shift in attention that served as Daniel's reckoning. Every flashbulb, every whispered question, every polite but pointed recognition of Elena's authority chipped away at his carefully constructed arrogance. In a single moment, the illusion he had maintained so confidently dissolved, leaving him exposed, humbled, and confronted with the truth. While he had sought validation through audacious displays and shallow charm, Elena had commanded it through skill, intellect, and integrity. As the applause washed over the runway, Elena felt a quiet, profound satisfaction settle within her. It was not the loud, triumphant kind of victory that demanded attention, but the deep, resonant satisfaction of knowing that every ounce of effort she had poured into her work, every sleepless night, every careful negotiation, had culminated in this moment. She stood poised, radiant and unshaken, her hands lightly resting on her growing belly, the life within her a constant reminder of the future she was building, not just for herself, but for her child. Daniel's ostentatious display of wealth and audacity had been a shallow performance, whereas her own triumph was rooted in substance, in the quiet mastery of creation and leadership. Every detail of the show had borne her mark: the flawless execution of the runway, the model's confident strides, the harmony of the lighting and music, all reflected her meticulous planning. While the audience clapped and whispered, Elena allowed herself a brief internal smile, savoring the irony that the man who had flaunted a mistress for attention had been completely overshadowed by the very woman he had wronged. Her mind drifted for a moment to Daniel's expression, the faltering smirk, the forced posture, the tension that betrayed his loss of control, and she felt a sense of justice, tempered with grace. She had chosen dignity over vengeance, but the universe had delivered its reckoning with perfect timing. There was also a profound emotional undercurrent running beneath her composed exterior. Elena had loved deeply, sacrificed willingly, and trusted without hesitation, only to be met with betrayal. That pain, once raw, had transformed into resilience. Every whispered critique, every subtle underestimate she had endured had strengthened her, making her ready to claim her rightful place not through confrontation, but through undeniable achievement. She had learned that power did not need to shout, it simply needed to exist, steady and immovable, radiating influence through quiet mastery. As the evening progressed, Elena felt a growing connection with the audience that went beyond admiration. Investors, designers, and even rivals recognized her skill, her vision, and her ability to remain composed under pressure. The respect she garnered was authentic, earned through work rather than spectacle. In that sense, her triumph was more complete than any superficial display of wealth or status could ever be. Her victory was not merely about recognition, it was a reclamation of her identity, a reaffirmation of her strength, and a celebration of her intellect. The applause, the whispers, and the lingering glances of awe were external confirmations of a truth she had always known. Elena Mercer's worth had never depended on Daniel or anyone else. It had been her own all along, quietly growing, resilient, and unstoppable. The gala party that followed the runway show had an energy that was electric yet charged with a subtle tension, a mixture of celebration and disbelief. Guests moved through the opulent ballroom, champagne flutes in hand, exchanging compliments and murmured speculations about the evening's dramatic shift. Elena moved gracefully among them, a vision of elegance and composure, receiving congratulations not just for her beauty or presence, but for the undeniable mastery and vision that had orchestrated the night. Each handshake, each polite nod, reinforced the recognition that she had quietly earned over years of dedication and sacrifice. Her aura was magnetic. People were drawn to her not because of spectacle, but because of substance, the kind of gravitas that commanded respect effortlessly. Daniel, by contrast, sat in a corner of the room, his tailored suit immaculate but his expression tight, a mixture of frustration, disbelief, and humiliation. He had expected admiration, whispers of envy, maybe even applause for his audacious public entrance with Sabrina, yet every conversation around him seemed to drift back to Elena. The realization that he had miscalculated so completely was written clearly across his face. Sabrina clung to him, her smile strained, attempting to maintain composure, but the gleam in her eyes had dimmed. The spotlight she had so confidently claimed had shifted, leaving her and Daniel in the shadows of the woman they had underestimated. Investors, designers, and media representatives flocked to Elena, eager to discuss partnerships, collaborations, and future opportunities. Every conversation underscored her credibility and vision, solidifying the truth that she was the real power behind the brand. Whispers of admiration and awe followed her through the crowd. Her reputation had transformed from that of the quiet, supportive wife to the central force of influence at the gala. Lila, standing beside her, exchanged a satisfied glance, recognizing that Elena had not only commanded the evening but had also subtly reclaimed the narrative from Daniel's arrogance. Meanwhile, Daniel's attempts to engage with guests were met with polite nods, brief smiles, and fleeting attention. His usual charm, which had so often opened doors and commanded interest, seemed hollow against the backdrop of Elena's triumph. Sabrina's panic grew, the reality of their diminished presence settling in as the evening wore on. The couple had been used to controlling the gaze of others through scandal and appearance, but Elena had proven that authentic authority could not be overshadowed by superficial display. By the time the gala drew to a close, it was clear who had emerged victorious. Elena left the ballroom with quiet dignity, her supporters trailing behind, while Daniel and Sabrina were left navigating the uncomfortable reality of their public humiliation. The evening had demonstrated more than a simple reversal of attention. It had highlighted the triumph of substance over spectacle, integrity over arrogance, and quiet mastery over ostentatious display. Elena's silent victory was complete, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present, a testament to the power of resilience, vision, and unwavering self-respect. Elena stepped out of the gala into the cool night air, the city lights reflecting softly against her flowing gown. The hum of celebration behind her felt distant, almost like a memory of a world that had tried to diminish her but had failed spectacularly. She breathed deeply, savoring the quiet victory that had been earned not through confrontation or spectacle, but through unwavering dedication, skill, and patience. Every whispered doubt, every underestimated effort, had led to this moment of triumph. With Lila walking beside her, their hands brushing in a gesture of mutual pride and solidarity, Elena felt an unshakable sense of accomplishment, a reassurance that she had reclaimed not only her position but also her dignity. Behind her, Daniel lingered at the entrance of the gala, a figure rigid with frustration and humiliation. The night had revealed the stark reality of his choices. His display of arrogance, the flaunting of a mistress in front of colleagues, investors, and the media, had backfired spectacularly. Where he had sought validation and admiration, he found only the sharp contrast of Elena's quiet, undeniable power. Sabrina, too, was visibly shaken, realizing that her role as the centerpiece of Daniel's attention had been temporary and hollow. The spectacle they had orchestrated to assert dominance had instead highlighted their own insecurities and dependence on shallow admiration. Elena's mind wandered briefly to the child she carried, imagining the life she would nurture away from the shadows of betrayal and superficiality. Her triumph was not just personal, it was generational. She had built an empire from patience, intellect, and resilience, and her child would inherit not just wealth but the strength of character, vision, and integrity that defined Elena. In every detail of the night, the applauding audience, the media attention, the newfound recognition of her authority, there was proof that her choices had been right, that substance would always outshine ostentation. As she descended the steps of the gala, Elena felt the weight of the past lift from her shoulders. The world had witnessed her quiet reclamation of power, and she stepped forward into a new chapter with confidence, grace, and an unshakable sense of self. Daniel and Sabrina were left behind, symbols of fleeting desire and hollow bravado, while Elena moved toward a future she would shape with purpose. The city skyline stretched before her, vast and inviting, a canvas for the life she was determined to build. In that moment, Elena understood the truth of her journey. Real worth was not measured by wealth, appearances, or the ability to shock others. It was measured by strength, resilience, and the legacy one leaves behind. And as the night deepened, Elena Mercer walked into that future, radiant and unbowed, ready to lead with dignity, to nurture life, and to continue building the empire she had quietly commanded from the very beginning.